Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Miller. I'm the director of Bayliss Public Library, which is now a member of Superior District Library. And I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight to our Superior Poetry Cafe for July of 2013. Jonathan Johnson visited Bayliss Library 2 years ago on the first UP book tour. He migrates between northern Michigan, Scotland, and Washington State, where he teaches in the MFA program at Eastern Washington University. He's the author of 2 books of poems, Mastodon, 80% Complete, 2001, and In the Land We Imagined Ourselves, 2010, both from Carnegie Mellon University Press. And the nonfiction book, Hannah and the Mountain, Notes Toward a Wilderness Fatherhood, from the University of Nebraska Press. His work has appeared in the Best American Poetry and numerous other anthologies. In March, EWU Theater premiered his play Ode about John Keats and Fanny Braw. The new book, Way North, Collected Upper Peninsula New Works, edited by Ron Rickey, includes an introduction by Jonathan as well as a poem and a story that he wrote. After his reading, we'll take a short break, and then we'll have our open mic. If you haven't signed up, please sign up in the back. And please help me welcome Jonathan Johnson.
Thanks, Ken, for the introduction and for having me. I also want to add my thanks to the library and the Friends of the Library. As Ken said, I read here a couple of years ago as part of the author tour and had a fantastic time. And I just wanted to thank you guys for having me back. A special thanks to Susan James for setting up all the arrangements and the invitation. Terrific accommodations. We got this beautiful, we walked in and it's this big king-size 4-poster bed and a desk looking out the window. And so it's not the usual thing for a poet. So thanks for that, it's pretty great. And Anne, nice to see you. And I wanted to say afterwards, I got books for sale for $10, which is a discount of $5 off the cover price. I'm happy to sign them, and that'll be after the reading, after my reading, which I'm very much looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to hearing some other folks read. Poetry of the UP is a great fondness and love of mine, so I'm really looking forward to the reading that'll happen after my reading. So I'm hoping to hear from a lot of you. Got a stone from Whitefish Point from earlier today, so that'll keep us company and see us through what we have to do here. Let's see. I thought what I would do is I thought I'd kind of go chronologically. I thought I'd work through my first 2 books, and then I've got some new poems. So I thought I'd do like maybe 5 poems from my first, 5 from my second, and maybe another 5 or half dozen new poems. So we kind of work our way through. Roughly, I'm a very prolific writer. I'm a very, very slow publisher. I publish maybe 1 out of 40 or 50 things I write. So roughly, this is my 20s and this is my 30s, and we'll give you my 40s so far when we get to the end. And so that's what we'll do kind of chronologically. So anybody have to live downstate for a while? There's great places downstate, but did anybody have to live downstate for a while, right? I had to live downstate for a while when I went to graduate school. I did my first graduate school at Northern Michigan, and then I did more graduate school because some people can't get enough punishment downstate. And I was living down there. I was extraordinarily homesick. We were living in Kalamazoo, my wife Amy and I, and we had a little duplex off KL Avenue, if you know Kalamazoo. And I calculated at one point that within a 1-mile radius of us, there were 60,000 people living, because there were the dorms and then the student apartments, and they had riots during the football games, if you've read about those. Whenever I think Western would play, it was non-conference, but when Western would play State, I think is when they had the riots. Anyway, so what it did is it made an insomniac out of me, because at night, all those 60,000, or the vast majority of those 60,000 souls would go to sleep. And so it felt a little like there was some tiny modicum of wilderness out there. And it's the only way I could kind of soothe my like inflamed heart to be down around so many people, was to stay up late at night. And what I did is I kind of imagined these characters in the Upper Peninsula, and they sort of started telling me monologues, these people did, and I started writing down their monologues. So this is one of those, and I don't know what else there is you need to know. Most of you probably know the band Pure Prairie League. They have that song Amy, which has always been a favorite for Amy and me. So they show up a little bit, and I think everything else you're going to be fine. So this fellow that I'm imagining telling this poem is also an insomniac, but an insomniac somewhere up in some garret apartment in one of those, beautiful old UP houses that's been chopped up in all these tiny little cheap apartments, and is a painter. I imagine a painter who can't sleep in the middle of winter up here during a blizzard, right? So that's how I frame this person in my head. Renewal. This empty monarch wood stove and rotting birch aren't much excuse for my stack of stinking beer bottles, but we do have the snow. The cars on snow-packed pavement, exhaust and subsequent tail light, and I want to crack open my fingers, hear nothing of argument or image as pure song spills out and fills the room. Maybe February enters this town with the clarity of a child's hands, and the lighthouse stands to its knees in black waves, searching the last cloud bellies before the horizon, scanning as if some lover might be sailing Superior home tonight after all these years. This much alone would be a sight. Still, a fine desolation refuses to mix our casualties with the first blood of the ironwood girl as she runs from a barn into a field, twisted junk cars abandoned like her father's lovers in the wreckage of the corn. And if we belong to the Midwest only as abstract expressionists, it's all the same. We live here with lake effect piling in our yards. The snow moves through us without lights and blasts between suspension wires at night above the Mackinac Bridge, sticking in 100-foot-tall strands. And the band covers Pure Prairie League every Thursday, 9 to close. Out at the empty county airport, where all the flights are canceled, blue points strobe in time up the landing strip just in case. Up in this gable room, the greatest possible bravery is a hairbrush of yellow, spiderweb at dawn. We always toy with hopefulness. Splatters of yellow dot my dark wood floor like dandelions above all the empty setting. The people living there under a ceiling of expected snow. Without me, they sleep. But a few old ones eye the night like crushed food they can still chew and shove it in their mouths. You may have read, I think it was maybe 92. It was early in the days of UP mushing. This, I guess, the second wave of UP mushing. The early days of UP mushing, long gone. But the UP competitive mushing, the early days of UP competitive mushing, like the early 90s. You may have read about a poor fellow who fell through the ice, and he drowned. They think largely because he was attempting to untangle his dogs. What had happened was that the race used to go across, going to Escanaba across Little Bay de Noc, right? And what happened, there was a crazy warm up, and then so all this fog came in off Lake Michigan, and it created this terrible fog condition on the ice. And they marked the trail, but it was very easy to get lost as this musher ended up out on open water and drowned, they think, trying to free as many of his dogs as he could. Well, he was caught, and they were caught in the cold water. I was handling, a couple of friends of mine were mushing that year, and I had the great fun of being their handler. So I drove the crew cab, the dog truck, to the next checkpoint, put down the straw and the bed and the dog food. And it was this great, wonderful, like it is most of the time, it was this great, wonderful kind of festival and great fun. And then when word came in that this person had died, the kind of weight and resonance of that really hit all of us, and just incredible love. A lot of these people are really solitary, curmudgeonly folks. They end up coming into these big, events where there's tons of people watching, but they're really not always, my friends weren't, but often they're really private, quiet people that like to be off in the woods with their animals and have a really strong attachment to them. So I wrote this in response to that. It's called Midnight Run. When the ice fell through, there was plenty of time, a solid chance to regain control. The dogs sank dazed and silent. He knew it was neither act nor accident. The ice had no opinion, no targets. In fog, they veered off course, away from the orange cones, the barks from the other teams dissolving with the lights of town and solid crust. A record thaw flooding the race with slush and risk, and had fallen into open water where the lake rebuilds itself. What remains once we survive our names is guesswork and paranoia that ruins us for this world we've made. We cultivate the obedient clues to salvage an epitaph. No one will use the washing machine tools in his truck. Everything else is dog-related, even his 5 acres littered with sleds and dog houses made from dryer shells. So it's come down to this. He's fallen through before on the last leg of the Yukon quest, slush up over the skids, soaking the team and his feet in river water cold enough to burn flesh. We have no way of knowing how cold. In the morning, the Coast Guard pilot will spot 3 huskies wandering the edgeless flows and pass the word to the rest of us, who will perfect our impatient, vague despair. But now, the private gesture. Tonight, all that remains is to unharness the lead and wheel dogs from the rest, a doomed gang chained to each other's drowning. Their gray eyes panic for surface light, then fix to a man's headlamp, still burning through the water all the way down. So, as Ken said, we migrate. Which, when I was young, and I used to see poets, with their bios talking about what they do, and it said spends part of the year here and spends part of the year here, I used to think, you son of a bitch. Rich son of a bitch. Privileged rich son of a bitch. So I don't know what happened. I do know what happened. What happened is, I'm twin-hearted. My dad's family goes way back in North Idaho and the Pacific Northwest, and that's where I happened to get lucky enough to find a job. And the UP is home to me. My wife was born here. We met in high school. And my mom's family goes way back in Scotland, and I'll talk about that later. And I just can't give up. I mean, it's environmentally irresponsible and economically completely unsustainable. But yet we migrate all over the place. It's ridiculous. Our Trailblazer out there has 190,000 miles and is covered with bugs from 7 states from this most recent migration. So we go through Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, and it's really easy, and I did this when I was younger, to look forward only to the North Woods, Minnesota, and when you start to see the Rockies, for those of you who've done that trip, it's easy to say, oh geez, here we are in the vastness of North Dakota and eastern Montana, and there's nothing to it. But what I discovered was that it's really an acquired taste, that the vast open prairie and the vast open kind of sagebrush ranch land, and I've very, very much come to look forward to and love that part of the migration. So this is a poem kind of about driving east, looking forward to being home in the UP, but also this sort of awareness of being in the prairie, kind of like being at sea, sort of. It's called Red Like Rust. And part of the title's a little bit of an inside joke, right? If you're from here and you take your car in for service anywhere else, you can hear the guy underneath it, right? If you were at one of those oil change places going, oh my gosh, where is this from? Right? It's all rusted out under here. So the poem's called Red Like Rust. One example of communication is when truckers flick their lights off and on so passing truckers know it's safe to slide back into the right lane. See what I mean? Stand in Dakota fields watching from the dark. Stir your fire for the lift and swirl of sparks. Time is an abundant commodity when considered collectively. Beauty in rivets in a steel hull in the inland sea. Turned table legs of blood-red mahogany. Inches into miles of asphalt tell how human hours were lived, lives spent. Fuel for the blaze all names become. Circle the wreck you're pulled from. Believe what you suspect. The jaws of life are built in. Go home. There the park deer are plump and eat from your hand. Lie down on the rocks of the river beach and let your fists uncurl. Practice dying this way. Spruce rising like arrows shot through your body. The copper sound of swallows in shallow water running fast over sandstone, cracking your heart, which had turned against you. Would you have a woman touch your sun-warmed face? Don't count on her. But here, count on here. Sometimes you can count on a woman. I've had that great fortune. We were just in, what's the coffee shop on Main Street here, a couple blocks down?
Cup of the Day.
Cup of the Day, right? We were just in Cup of the Day, and there was a fairly stout gentleman there. We came in just in time to get a quick tea before they closed at 6. There's a fairly friendly, stout gentleman, and he asked us what we were up to and sort of chatted us up, and we said we were taking ourselves a little vacation here as part of doing some business on the east side. Even in a coffee shop, I'm reluctant to tell people, hey, I'm a writer and I'm going to give a reading. I just feel like I'll get dragged into the street and beaten. I'm not sure why. Anyway, I said I'm doing some business, and this said, and we'd wrapped in a little trip. The two of us wrapped in a little trip. Is our 13-year-old daughter staying with her grandparents, and he said, well, she's not old enough to have a 13-year-old daughter. You cradle robber, and chatted her up. That was very cute. But it got me thinking. We just celebrated our 19th anniversary. And so I wanted to read this poem. This is a poem we actually had on we had printed on our wedding invitations. It's called Domestic. Up the snow-packed road, miles past blacktop and the last electricity, we leave the car and ski fresh tracks down a logging trail abandoned under years of neglect and winter. The wolves have made their comeback to this country. They congregate near incognito dens. In the quiet, when you've disappeared over a ridge and beyond this stand of snow-loaded tamarack, the sun leans through low limbs to have the last word, and I stop and stand still. You are the only thing moving in this valley. The forest keeps us, two creatures scouting on instinct, the edgeless territory of home. And that's really proven true. I wrote, it's funny how you know something about yourself, even if you don't. For those of you who write, you know how it goes, right? Something just comes, the edgeless territory of home. Two creatures scouting on instinct, the edgeless territory of home. I said it, we put it on our wedding invitations, it was sweet. And it's really proven true these 19 years. We've lived all over the place, traveled even more, and boy, you wake up and the first person you see, the first thing you see is the person you love there's this sense of home wherever you go, as cliche as it is. It's really been true for us. So there's a road around here, I bet, that's a lot like this road in Marquette County. This poem's called the 510. Some of you may know it. It's the road that goes from Negaunee to Big Bay. And actually, at the time, it was even more kind of remote than it is now. But you've noticed that some parts of the UP, well, I'm very interested in the effect money has on a place. Money has had a really big effect on the Pacific Northwest, on places that I grew up in. And there are some roads that you can really see money's come in, and for whatever reason, natural phenomena or proximity to town or whatever, those places have changed. And then other roads, not so much. Or there's still some places where dreams are still to be had. You know, the common inexpensive dream for somebody who wants to escape to the woods. And in Marquette County, that road was the 510. And I just love that place. When I'm home for the summer, one of the things I'll do is, I'll put a bunch of USGS maps on the seat in the truck, and I'll start driving. I'll just kind of go back and check in on places that I've known and try and discover some new places. And it's confusing, right? Because sometimes there's a new logging road, and you come in the middle of and I've always thought about the animals, what that must be like, right? They coming through places that they always go, and then all of a sudden everything's different. There's just smells of chainsaw gas and bar oil, and all these stumps, and very disorienting. Also, I should give you fair warning. My mom always, said, you gotta be classy about your language. So there's some harsh language in here, but the poem is about expectation. And so I think if you'll hang on till the end, you'll see that it was worth it. The 510. The smell of diesel, then taillights flickering through trees. I'm not especially handsome or optimistic. I'm just the man in the pickup behind the bus. Not even a regular on this road. So when the girl in the last seat flips her notebook open, scrawls a message, and holds it to the back window, I expect only, fuck off. Pulling closer, I read, hi. Her slight, closed lips smile through the dirty back window. Someone has cut her hair straight at her shoulders. Freckles splash across her face and forehead. And I'm suddenly sorry I said I'm not optimistic. Sorry to have begun ungratefully. After all, this is the road for starting over. This is the world of cheap acres and possibility, where high school kids ride the North Bus, winding its low gears up the Yellow Dog Valley, dust rising from the washboard, dust falling like talcum on the spruce and birch in their wake, dust falling sun-baked on my hood. So just what am I doing here? What will I know when I know this? The road is called the 510. No carved oak cottage signs up here, no neat red newspaper boxes hanging from thin brass chains above buckets of snapdragons, just mailboxes, every few miles, leaning precariously over the road. Every week or two I'm back, dropping it into four-wheel where the pavement ends, USGS map rolled on the dash, six-pack of RC on the seat beside me. Once, Dawn came down like a lynx, sniffing her way off the ridge, sniffing cautiously, muscles tense around the truck. Lost on a logging spur, I'd parked in the middle of 1,000-acre clear-cut and fallen asleep, blue-green aurora burning above my windshield. This place, hundreds of empty, scrubbed square miles, asks nothing. The Pup Creek asks nothing and spills over granite if I abandon my life or not. The old inevitable pup. Something about its storyline. Lower elevations, an open, colder water, bronze water pushing into lake blue. The freckled kid presses her beautiful, forgiving syllable to the glass. But why say forgiving? She has concerns of her own, and you must suspect by now that the aurora burns brighter somewhere else, somewhere where the roads have woodsy names, and this poem might be read. Say, down around Shelter Bay, where bright new Jeeps tuck themselves into garages, and the moose are more frequent, crossing lawns below honey-brown log homes, heading down to the bog preserve and virgin white pine. But you must believe me when I tell you that, charmed beyond the usual solitude, I roll down the window and wave. Hi, her sign says. Hi, as we ride, smiling, watching each other through the glass and dusty air, into no other mountains but these. Hi, 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 shuddering and bouncing with a yellow bus over washboard. There is a word for what we have, and the word is optimism. Why else would anybody ever be here, right? If you didn't have optimism, why would the immigrants who came here have been here if they didn't have optimism? You have to. If you are here in the UP, you have optimism. That much can be said. It might be hidden, right? Sometimes it's hard to find in some of the characters, but you have it. Speaking of people who find their way to the UP, I think one of the best written characters in all of literature, and I'm not alone in this, a lot of people think this, one of the best written characters in all of literature is Satan in Milton's Paradise Lost. He's just incredible. He's so, I mean, the critics have lots of different things to say about this, but the smart ones, I think, say, well, of course he seems incredible to us, right? Some people say, Blake said, Milton was of the devil's party and didn't know it, right? Blake's a pretty smart guy, but I think Milton knew exactly what he was doing. Of course Satan is the attractive one to us in Paradise Lost. Of course he's the one we can relate to and understand, right? So there was a time when I was not able to get back here as much as I wanted, and frustrated and bitter about that, about being other places. And I was reading Paradise Lost as it would happen at the time, and really thinking about this character Satan. And the first time he comes down, he and the other rebel angels have decided they're going to launch this sort of insurgency against God. And instead of attacking God directly, which didn't work out so well the first time, they all got expelled and ended up on the lake of fire, they were going to attack God by attacking his beloved, right? Like us. It makes the hair on the back of your neck stand on end, right, when you read that stuff, when Satan goes, I think I know what we can do to get back at God. Oh man, he's talking about us. So this poem is called Parole, and it envisions a kind of Satan-like character coming back to the UP, the kind of Garden of Eden, and he's gonna get back at those people who kicked him out. And it begins with a little epigraph from Milton, and the epigraph is, with what delight I could have walked thee round. With what delight I could have walked thee round. And that's what Satan says when he first sees paradise, right? He's come to destroy it and those of us in it, but he's just so moved when he sees it. He says, with what delight I could have walked thee round. Parole. Blowtorch sun glazes the snow in the woods, and his tires sigh a constant low flame over dry pavement. An hour ahead, he'll top the rise over his city, and he knows he'll want to cut only the engine, pull to the roadside and sit, loving as if he'd made it. That cherished lake will open, an abscess slit across the horizon. The archipelago will still be iced in, though the icebreaker arrives with its bruised flags around this time each year. He can almost imagine his impulse ending there. Town below, a darling from whom no heartlessness could exile him. Houses from that far are eager and forgivable. The world just physical and penny whistle clear. If unrecognized, he could walk those streets. He swears he'd pass every open window and speak only to the transformers, angels themselves humming from high telephone poles. If the citizens would let him stay, he'd love them for it. He'd stroke their doors with his empty hand and walk on into more night. But they won't have him. They take the days for themselves only and would scour the dark to be rid of him. And so his cruise stays set as his stare, and the stranded train rusts beside him. The near trees turn, chorus line quick as he passes. The far trees stand the ridge like cavalry. And when the sign says 47 miles, he pictures how beyond the harbor, seemingly above it all, the breakwater unbends itself like his straight razor. Does the National Public Radio affiliate in the Sioux get Writer's Almanac? You guys get that? So apparently Garrison Keillor's retired right now.
He's on tour right now, so Billy Collins is still.
Oh, he's coming back. I missed that announcement. I've been hearing Billy Collins. It's perfectly delightful, but I just, not hearing Garrison Keillor, I was mortified. Oh man, no, this is The Sun Rises in the East. Sorry?
I was worried at first too, and then I found out.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason I was worried is I had the incredible honor of having this poem that I'm about to read read on Writer's Almanac a couple years ago. And it was a magnificent thing to have happen, because you think, gee, you have maybe like 5 million people hearing it. But my daughter, right? That was the thing, right? If you're in the arts, and especially if you're in a kind of obscure art, and you have kids, especially kids, she was a tween at the time, the idea that you can somehow be in any media, even if it's as obscure as media goes as like NPR, but we all gathered around the radio, and here comes Garrison Keillor, and she knew his voice from having had to endure listening to like Prairie Home Companion as we go through Minnesota on the way home. It's just let us listen a little bit longer, and then we can put Taylor Swift back on. Anyway, so we gathered all around the radio, and there was Garrison Keillor doing a much better job of this poem than I will, even though I wrote the thing. That's really something when you hear somebody read it way, way better than you ever could when you wrote it. But I'll do my best. It's called Night Bicycle, and when I was a college student, I spent a lot of time, on my mountain bike riding around Marquette. I went to Northern, and sometimes I'd make it all the way home from a tavern, and sometimes I'd have to stop along the way. And the thing about Marquette, and I think the Sioux is the same way from what I know of it with Lake State, is there's lots of really convenient porches with like porch furniture out. If it's the middle of the night and you're heading home after last call on your bike, safely, right? You're doing the right thing. There are many convenient places to stop. And then you can get on your way when you're ready to go again.
Did you buckle up?
I did not buckle up on my bike, but I did have a helmet. I was among the early helmet wearers. I have to say, my wife can attest to this. I'm a worrywart, as a lot of writers are. And because you can imagine things when you're a writer, right? Things can happen. So I did wear my helmet, even riding home after last call. Night Bicycle. Black mamba of the front tire over wet streets, the wet streets, after rain falling from the neighborhood leaves, luminescence of lampposts, lamps up through the trees. Sink into someone's porch chair and look at all these leaves, then ride on into the smell of sawdust, that sweet smell of wood. Someone is renovating. May he do it right. May he be careful. May he do it right. May the work of hands satisfy. Sleep on, amigos. The girl who left years ago loved you behind that window. She is now some person living a state away, which only makes her more. You and me, little poem. Mi amigo, compadre. Inside each dark house, the street lights keep doing their thing on the far wall. Tonight, though, tonight's street light makes me need you. It's writing indifference, little poem, indifference to us on that far wall. Black mamba of the front tire over wet streets, the wet streets, after rain falling from the neighborhood leaves, luminescence of lampposts' lamps up through the trees. So one of those places that I'd head home from is Vango's. I don't know if you guys know Vango's over in Marquette. Yeah, I first went into Vango's, I think, when I was about 17 years old, and it was not that night, but shortly thereafter, Jim and Ray played. And you can walk into Vango's. In fact, it's 7:45, 20 to 8. They're going to be starting in about an hour. Can't too late for tonight unless we leave right now. But nothing's changed. 27 years ago, nothing has changed. Same music. Jim and Ray still look great. It's just amazing. And maybe it's a little like the Afterlife, that place. poem's dedicated to a friend of mine, Paul Limburg, who's a Buddhist priest, and he was telling me about the week of the Buddha's enlightenment, which is this year was like this particular year this poem was written was the first week of December. The poem also has, it uses a little bit of that Van Morrison song, Into the Mystic. I don't know if you know that song. And Jim and Ray really do a beautiful job on that song, if you can ever get them to play it. So a little of that shows up, and I think that's everything you need to know. Van Goghs, Tuesday night in the week of the Buddha's enlightenment, for Paul Limburg. Snow falls. Stress the first syllable, not like Vincent van Gogh, but Van Goghs. Snow falls. Say it and step out before Jim and Ray finish into the mystic, so that the guitar follows even after the door closes behind you. To when that foghorn blows, you know I will be coming home, as the rumble comes roof light riding the plow up third and passes, just as Ray finally hits that high note you've waited for all night at I, to the spark tossing thunder of blade on asphalt up through your feet into Wanna Rock Your Gypsy Soul, to the side-to-side lights on the back of the plow, by now passing Crescent and Discount Vacuum, the pasta shop, Prospect Street. If a town could take you to bed, this is her touching your cheek just before, and you go, knowing the music will fill this cold air where you were through 3, 4, 5 more passes of the plow as you sleep, and Jim unplugs his bass and the Van Gogh sign goes dark. Let this be how it is just before dying, knowing that what you noticed remains. So we'll wish them a good night tonight and no snow. It's entirely possible. People don't believe that. People elsewhere don't believe that. So a few new ones, just a few new ones. Let's see what we want to do here. I think we'll do some Scottish ones. How about that? My wife and daughter and I were living over there a couple of years ago. We lived there for a year in a little cottage on the sea. It was incredible. A cottage from the 1630s. And every window looked out on the North Sea. There's a little lighthouse about 5 miles offshore that would start up around dusk. And the lighthouses, I don't know if they work that way in the Great Lakes or not, but I think they do. The lighthouses all have a signature flash, right? They work that way in the Great Lakes too?
Yep.
Right, so you, before GPSs and all that, a mariner could know the location of coming out of a storm by knowing what the flash was. And the Isle of May, which was our lighthouse when we lived in Scotland, was a flash, another flash, then 14 seconds, and then 2 more flashes. And our daughter would, she sometimes, the walls were so thick in this old cottage that every window had this giant window seat on it, because, and so she would sometimes curl up there, get her sleeping bag and curl up there, and she knew how long to wait. She'd see the 2 flashes, and she knew how long to wait, she was 8 at the time, to say, "Good night, lighthouse," to have it flash back in answer, right at the right moment. And I've always thought that in a way that's kind of poetry, right? The language is not necessary. When people ask you what poetry is for, it's not necessary in the way that the lighthouse flash is necessary or was necessary 100 years ago. They needed that lighthouse flash 100 years ago. But now that flash communicates something to us, or at least to my 8-year-old daughter, of a connection with the world, right? Like she can use that as a way of saying, I'm here, I'm here. So we lived there for a year, and as I said earlier, my mom's people are all from there, and I did the usual tourist thing. I thought, well, I should go see where the ancestors are from, my great-great-grandfather, and so I had some papers that an aunt had sent me when I was over there, and I put it off till near the end. And right near the end, when we were due to move back home after our year was up, we went. I got the papers out. And I discovered that my great-grandparents were from a town called Glenelg in Scotland. And I thought, wow, that's incredible, because that's right across from the Isle of Skye, on this channel called the Sound of Sleep. By the way, poetry falls out of the air in Scotland. In case you're ever looking for a place where it's easy, the town is called Glenelg, which is a palindrome. Same forward as back, Glenelg, and it's on the Sound of Sleep across from the Isle of Skye. You don't even have to try. And I saw that and I thought, holy cow, we've been all over that area. We've never gone to the town. We've gone this perfect like circle around it, the ferry over to Skye, and then there's this incredible castle that we went to, and I'd done this run up in that area, and I thought, wow, that's incredible. So we got to go see it. We got to go see this graveyard and see if we can find Anne Campbell and John McClure, my great-great-grandparents, and my daughter's great-great-great-grandparents. So the three of us drove up, and we went up this really, really steep pass, and we came over the top. And I don't know that I'm a believer in genetic memory, but all my life I've gone looking for a certain kind of place, right? And just trees and sloping hills, mountains, and a coast, and this like little river, flat little river valley, about a mile wide down at the bottom. And I just could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. I thought, this is where my people came from. So we went down into town, and within 5 minutes, in this little cemetery the size of this room, we found John McClure and Anne Campbell, placed some flowers, and thought, really felt incredibly satisfied. Went to the little village store, got some ice creams, and thought, well, we should look around and to ask a few folks. Maybe there's some McClures still living in the area. It was my mom's maiden name, McClure. And so we went, we asked somebody, and they said, oh, you'll want to talk to Houston and Christine in that little cottage down at the foot of the river on the sea. I mean, really, this cottage at the foot of the river on the sea. And he's a McClure, he'll know if any of those McClures are still about. So we went down, it wasn't there, left a note, gonna go to the beach and get a few shells to send my aunt. And there's this woman pushing over there they call it a pram, a stroller. And we stop and I say, we're looking for McClures. I'm related to some McClures in the cemetery. And I said, do you know if there's any McClures about? And she said, well, you want to ask Houston and Christine. And, oh, well, they're gone. I said, we tried. I said, but have the McClures been here a long time? And the Scots are very dry. And so she's had these glasses on at the end of her nose. And she looked up at me over the end of her nose and she said, 13th century. Whoa. So she said, well, if they're not home, try the farm. When you drove in, there's a farm on the side of the road. You passed it. It was the first one in the village. And their daughter, Catherine, whose new name is Lamont, married name is Lamont. But she said, oh, it's 3. She'll be away at the school getting her kids. And as soon as she said kids, my daughter in the back seat went, yes. So we drive up to the farm, and there's this girl climbing over the fence, and to get from the UPS truck has just driven away, and she's getting what's obviously a pitchfork. Like why they wrapped it in brown delivery paper, it was a pitchfork from UPS. And this is incredible. And so she's heading back to the barn, and I said, excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm looking for Catherine Lamont. She said, oh yeah, she's over in the barn. So I went over to the barn, and I walk around the corner. I can hear this rattling going on, this mechanical rattling, and I go around the corner, and they're shearing sheep. Honest to God, they're actually shearing sheep, which I've done before out at my dad's family's place in Idaho. And I say, oh, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I've done that work before. I know it's really hard. I think there's some chance, I'm a McClure from my family I'm going to fast forward the story. An hour later, her parents show up. Houston and you and Christine, her parents show up. We're in this farm kitchen, and I've got this stuff, this paper spread out. Anya's out with what turns out to be her cousins, playing with the Shetland ponies and the border collies. And they're saying, well, we lost touch with your side in '62. And I said, well, my grandparents died, quite young. And they said, oh, okay. And that was it. It was all cleared up. We were back. Everything put back together. And if it had gone it was one piece of paper that told me what cemetery to look at. One more generation would have been lost forever. And I just got back after staying with them. I went and stayed with them in March for a better part of a week and helped tag calves and burn heather. And it's like a Disney movie ending from looking for your Scottish ancestry. And I brought back poems because, like I said, they fall out of the sky. So this is from Glenelg. It's called Glenelg First Night, and it's got an epigraph in Gaelic. And the epigraph is the last line of the poem, so you have to wait for what it means. But in Gaelic, it's Gus Bris an Law, and that's written on all my family's tombstones. Gus bris an law. Glenelg, first night. Out from this croft house opens the comfort of black mountains and black sea, black wind flattening black grass, black granite and black names. Names with sharp shape and names become smooth. Black rain, black wind, black sheep, white snowflakes, specks high on the dead bracken hill today. Sheep don't get cold. A boy with whom I share 700 years of people here told me, black tractor, black hay, black sky, ferry tied to a black pier, black school, black shop, narrow black road in cursive down from Radigan Pass, black Riverfoot Cottage, where the Glen Moor meets the black sound of sleet, black sound of wind at the window, black ceiling of clouds scrolling fast, black smoke from the chimney, black heart, black blood in black veins, black ink in the dark. 102 years since my great-grandfather slept in this black glen, my silver car blacked out on the black gravel drive, black lichen on black rock stacked fence, up steep slopes by hands become dirt, black maple, black grass, 15 black, white, and black collie pups drowsing at their mother's black teats, black peat, black quilt, black pillow, black sheets. And I, who have never slept here, am back and drift. No, not drift. Touch ground to sleep in the comfort of black mountains and black sea, the infinity of color in black until the day breaks. That's the Gaelic until the day breaks. Let's see. A little one frame. So I gave you that one from our wedding invitations, and here's one when I was away. I went by myself this time to Scotland, and I had to go down to London for a little bit to do a thing, and so we'd spent quite a bit of time in London together, and with our daughter, and then so I was by myself, and this little poem just came to me. In Green Park, in the Rose. In Green Park, in the rows of, are they mossy sycamore? Hard to tell in the hazy first chill light of a still leafless late March London morning. I've found you again, though you're asleep by now, I suppose. It's easy, this love. Every time I need only wait. And there we are, an empty bench. And then I think I'll end with this poem called Dispensation. That mother I was talking about, whose people were from Scotland, has been gone since 2004. And yeah, it's not the same world. It's like you're pushed out in a little boat from shore and you lose a parent forever. But I'm eternally grateful. I'm not going to get it right. I shouldn't even bother trying. But Ted Kooser has this poem called Mother. You should look it up. If not for you and the way you taught me to see life at play in things, I would be forever lonely. And that's how I feel about my mom. But she taught me some other things too. She taught me to rely on people. And that was easy to forget when you're grieving. It's easy to forget. It's easy to think the only thing that's in sympathy with you is the natural world. And so this is a poem about coming back to the living. And thanks again so much for having me, you guys. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your work. Really appreciate coming here. Dispensation. We are mistaken to suppose the dead want us to walk out at night and stare alone into the dark horizon. thinking them just beyond the wind. We stand facing the cold and waves like a shore pine shaped to absence. We speak to clouds we know only by a lack of stars. We count ourselves with them, keeping our backs to town, or gazing down shore at its small lights with abstracted affection. But the dead don't ask for our loneliness. We confuse loyalty to what is not with loyalty to them while trying not to shiver. In fact, our little errand was done when we heard the crescendo and diminuendo of those waves, visible only in the white of their ending, and thought what little we perceive of beauty's extent. Beyond that, the dead would send us to dens of laughter and warm light. "What are you doing out here?" they would ask. "There are songs being sung. Take yourself there. Touch someone's hand. Sit at a table where someone speaks the name I knew you by." Thanks so much, you guys.
We'll take a short break. Please enjoy the refreshments. There are books to be purchased and signed. And we have one open mic reader, so you guys, you have to step up and sign up back there, so we'll have more than one, please. It is, isn't it? Well, thank you for responding to my appeal. We now have 4 readers, so that's great.
Very good.
That's better than one, because I didn't want to listen to Frank all night.
Why not?
Okay, on that note, I should go before I get hurt, right? Our first reader is Judy Merrill Smith.
Thank you. I project too, so I'm going to try not to make that ring too much. I'm going to do 2 if that's okay. They're not very long. The first one's kind of a prose poem. It's one of those pieces that, just kind of comes out and you go, "Oh, that's pretty good," and just keep it. So, regret is a ravenous stranger at the door, demanding, ugly, brandishing a pistol that it will hold to your head, dropping you to your knees and demanding your good silver and the Rolex watch. If you accept the premise that his gun is loaded and that he will fire it if you do not cooperate, you are trapped and cannot flee his steely eyes. But if you are willing to gamble that there are no bullets or that the rust makes for misfires, that you have nothing to lose and risk is the only way to live, well then, you have a shot at freedom. And the second one was I decided to try some found poetry, which there's many variations of found poetry. This one we actually did as a group challenge in the Creative Endeavors group that meets here in the library. I found a kid's book. It's sort of like a Harry Potter type kid's book. We ripped out a page. Shh, I shouldn't say this in front of librarians.
Was it a library book?
No, it was a thrift store book. We each ripped out a page from the novel, and then you're to take the words on that page either side and come up with a poem out of the words. And it was kind of fun because there were some kind of magical words. There were fantasy animals and stuff. So it was kind of fun. So this is the one I liked the best out of the 2 pages that I tried. When she found the wooden door ahead of her, she knocked loudly enough to be heard, an unmistakable rhythm so that anyone who heard it might hover into a smile. Vision enhanced by the torch's beam, eyes peered through the narrow assurances onto that person at the door, then nodded and invited her courage.
I've always thought the best way to keep your place when you're reading is just tear the page out. Our next reader is Frank. Listen.
Thank you. I'll have a couple here. I think I'll do 3 even. That's okay.
Yes.
Let's see here. This first one comes from kind of sort of true story, but not quite. So let's see. Black on white. Black on white, fluttering across the snow of a vacant lot in earliest spring. A raven, panicked and panting, left wing trailing alongside while my traffic light changed. I returned later and followed the sound of mobbing crows to an old wood pile where the raven had found a little shelter. It bumped and bumped against the cordwood as I grabbed its neck and pulled it to my chest. At home, we wrapped the wing, feathers dulled and frayed, with white tape, slid it into a cat carrier, and left a little tin of dog food. That evening, we listened to the tap, tap, tap while we ate our own supper. 2 days later, it was dead. Thick black bill still shining, quarter covered with forward-facing feathers in front of still eyes. It felt smaller, I suppose, and I pulled it to me without resistance. I gave it its own air burial atop the brush pile among the cedars, where the fox would be sure to find it, and left as the snow fell, white on black. And I don't know how many here have been out in the fields and woods and such very much this spring, but you know that it was a bit of a bad year for ticks.
Oh, man.
At dusk, the thrush fed on your second-hand blood. The sky had purple with a falling red bullseye like circles surrounding a tick bite on sunburnished skin, hidden behind, under. And months earlier, hidden under the hollow bristles of the white-tailed doe who birthed fawns in the marsh behind the apple copse, and before that, behind the ear of a whitefoot field mouse, sleeping. Each cycle reaching back, smaller, simpler, until once past just a speck of egg, and before that even, last year, 2 gamete halves. A series of blood meals, each a step toward tonight, with the stars spinning and the moon spinning, till night, intact, finds itself buff bronze by the thrush's song. And here's a 3-parter. This is my latest poem right here. Still very rough, but we'll see what comes of it. The bridge is sleepless, too, blinking and stubbled with the first real winter ice. The northern lights are gone, and dawn won't sniff through the drifts for 4 more hours. Time here is abundant as the water draining through the locks, draining through the riverhead and Whitefish Bay and the big lake, drawing from the depths, circling home. And I wonder, how cold is that final? The icebreakers bruise black on their bow and are ready for... the icebreakers bruised black on their bow are ready to sleep again. And the snow is black, too, along the road, stubbled with stones kicked up by the plows. At dawn, the transformer hums. I hesitate to step into the car and turn the key, and instead, let the electric sing for a moment longer in its solitary. 9 months she's been gone, this solstice afternoon, and the day, bright, smells like sawdust. Stubble dropping from the new and swept out the door. For a moment, the street is quiet, waiting for the next wave. Across the street, the park bench is still empty, but ready.
See, it would have been no chore. Diane Meyer?
Got my library pen.
Imagine your shirt.
Okay, this one's called Question. The old red maple shades me on the deck. Sun shines on distant tamarack and pine. I think of the life we've had here ringed by forest. In 2001, you left this place, embarking on your life. That was 11 years ago. We love your visits. You'll be 29 next week. You can't fathom your 20s ending. I've just had my 65th birthday. You say I'm practically 70. This is a true story. We both contemplate bewilderment of time and place. If I sit with the red maple these next 11 years, could the trick of time be altered? Last night we had a celebration with friends for a dear friend who died last year. He would have been 95 yesterday. And I had written this for him, celebrating Bob. He burst onto the scene, as we all have, two-legged collection of electrified atoms, careening through life as stars and planets do, attracting and repelling, looking for a connection, love found, love lost, in storms of confusion, as life would have it. For some, like Bob, clouds lift, planets align, chaos transcended, pure love found, ready for flight into fusion, as we all hope to be. And then we've had some wanderlust in our lives too, and have spent time in the Southwest a few winters. And this one actually came from a Creative Endeavors group challenge, the writers group. And there were certain words that came up when we were playing, what is that game?
Upwards.
It's like Scrabble. Upwards. Okay. So I got all my words into this poem, but it has the Southwest theme. Whirlwind. I dream of a canyon. 600 years ago, the date, a place not so far away, where ravens soar and mountain lions loom. Bees drink from pink flowers, fish splash in the stream. I climb ancient rungs of rope ladder to cliffs through the fog, to caves formed in stone. Beats of a drum bring lines of a song, a sign from the past. A mourner's wail, sharp pain in his lung. He sees in a dream what is to come. Hand-formed clay pots they will loot. The lion they will cage. Cultures will clash. He sighs in a daze. From this whirlwind, I awake feeling dumb, questioning what our lives in this future have become. One more back here. Here it is. This one's in Texas, place in Texas. Under Amistad's true blue sky, tall willows like feathery torches, each leaf a vibrant light, in morning sun dancing tinsel in desert wind. Rio Grande dammed, flooded oasis, spare desert, 50 and more American coot, black bobbing bodies, busy bills in stark white contrast, softly bubbling, snickering, snorting, crazy coots keeping up the good paddle, holding their place, wind and birds making music, trees and grasses dancing, cactus indifferently still, red buds eager to push forth into spring. Under brushy groves, flattened faces of prickly pear, looking forward, tombstone-like, desert cemetery, desert life in winter.
And our final reader for this evening is Julia Rose.
I'm not reading from my phone because I'm tech savvy. I'm reading from my phone because I forgot to print. Because my printer is out of ink, which is how tech savvy I am.
Shall I text you a phone?
Not right now. Okay. I grew up on the western side of the UP in the Keweenaw. I grew up in Hancock and couldn't wait to leave because it was just so isolated. And there was just such a big world out there. And now I'm spending my 40s getting to know what I missed. I go home a couple times a year and I feel like I'm getting to know the place for the first time, and it's lovely. I also go back and my parents still live there, so of course I visit them. And my mother and I have a tradition. She always, we sit down and she shows me her latest favorite movie. And this is about that a few weeks ago. Chasing Leprechauns, a Hallmark presentation. I'm sitting with her, our backs to the picture window, watching her latest favorite made-for-TV movie while the sun sinks and day gives way to a fragile spring night. There are leprechauns. It's in Ireland, but it's not about little magic men. It's about my mother's favorite magic. The busy businessman from New York finds love in the arms of the blonde daughter of a pub owner, now passed. She keeps it open for the sake of the town, for the pleasure of the hunched old men, bright-eyed with ale and memories in the gold light of the little gathering place. He finds her, and she finds him, and my mother sits next to me, tear in her eye, lump in her throat, watching silently the final scene. They dance in the middle of the pub to no music. They kiss. The men nudge one another and smile. The credits roll and my mother leans over and whispers so Dad won't hear, "I always wanted to live in a little place like that." I think of their peeling gold house with the overgrown willow out front in a sleepy town tucked and stitched together on a hillside, steeped in the history of copper mines, the ruins of boom time marking centuries of dark nights in the barren winter, or soft spring evenings just like this one, when men and women gathered in small sandstone pubs, one for every little neighborhood or mining location, the Monte Carlo, Rudy's, Chutes, and of course, a Cozy Corners. I think of the kegs of beer, the stories and fights, the music, lovemaking, and ordinary nights full of company that have swirled around my mother for 40 years while she was chasing them here, alone, her back to the window. She leans her head on my shoulder and I bite my tongue. I always wanted to live in a little place like that. I can't tell her how close she came. I can't say, "You already do."
I'd like to thank every one of our poets tonight. Every one of you were magnificent. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. It was great. Thanks for bringing it. And please, there are more refreshments. There are more books to buy and to be signed. Enjoy. We're here till 9 o'clock.